Everything's racist now, folks. The race traders are at it again, this time Kendrick Perkins. So what I did, I haven't followed basketball for about 20 years because hashtag who cares. But I decided to go back and take a look at a lot of stuff. Maybe waste a bunch of time. But anyways, I wanted to prove Kendrick Perkins wrong because my mind is like a steel trap. And I thought about what he said and I thought, you're full of crap, buddy. You're an idiot. You're a moron. And everything's racist. Even the NBA MVP award is racist now. Yep. But these people are beyond the pale. It's going to be nothing but from today until Election Day and beyond. It's all racist, and you're all racist, and you should feel bad. But Kendrick Perkins is full of you-know-what, and I'll give you a whole bunch of data afterwards. The transcript and all the sources will be at Rumble, not YouTube. Screw you, YouTube. You suck. But let's roll the tape, and then I'll have a bunch of information afterwards proving that Kendrick Perkins is a dumb jock.
Racist all the time. Yeah, when it comes to China, everybody's suspiciously quiet. So JJ Redick, who I like a lot, was on one of these shows. And he's on this panel with Stephen A. Smith and this guy, Kendrick Perkins. And Kendrick Perkins had made some implication, wink and a nod, that the white guy who may win the NBA MVP only got it because he's white. Now, of course, because it's a liberal sports outlet, you figure out everybody's on the panel is just going to let it go because that's just what you do in wokeism. No, not yesterday. That didn't happen. This is weird that someone actually stood up and said something. Take a look.
Stephen A., Stephen A., I mean no offense to you, and I mean no offense to First Take, because I think this show is extremely valuable. It is an honor to be on this desk every day. It really is. But what we've just witnessed is the problem with this show, where we create narratives that do not exist in reality. The implication, what you are implying, that the white voters that vote on NBA are racist, that they favor white people. You just said that. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. That is exactly what you implied, Kendrick Perkins. That is exactly what you implied. Secondly, hold on.
I did not call. I stated the facts. And you're not about to sit up.
We all know what you implied the other day. We all know what you implied just now. Hold on.
I stated it's the facts. It's the facts. It's the facts.
Okay.
Well, listen, I only remember JJ Redick. This is a little crazy. Can I don't mean to get off course here. I remember JJ Redick. I think he played at Duke. I did not look this up. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I back then didn't follow college basketball. I followed the pros. Now I follow college, not the pros, which is kind of ironic. So I'm getting ready for this segment this morning. I'm putting it together. And there's three people on that panel. Stephen A. Smith, who's black, JJ Redick, who's white, and Kendrick Perkins, who's black. And I swear to you, I thought to myself, I should tell everyone I know who JJ Redick is, but I don't know who Kendrick Perkins is. And I thought to myself, you know what, Joe? I should say that. You know why? Every liberal watching this show will be like, of course, because you're obviously a racist. You know the white guy, right? That's it. You understand? Like, that's the default stupidity. Now, it doesn't matter that I know really well who Stephen A. Smith is, or that I could name probably the entire starting lineup of a number of NBA teams in the 90s and 80s, 9 out of 10 who happen to be black. None of that matters. When you're a race hustler, everything's about race all the time. So Kendrick Perkins, he's saying, no, I didn't imply that he was going to get the MVP because he was white. I'm just stating the facts. Okay, well, here's what Kendrick Perkins said, and you be the judge.
Why didn't he never bring up this in particular subject? When it comes down to guys winning MVP since 1990, it's only 3 guys that won the MVP that wasn't top 10 in scoring. Do you know who those 3 guys were?
Who were they?
Steve Nash, Jokic, and Dirk Nowitzki. No.
Dirk Nowitzki.
What do those guys have in common? I'll let it sit there and marinate. You think about it.
Well, what do they have in common? They're white. So it's kind of weird that Perkins is suggesting he wasn't making some kind of racial reference when he literally leaves the segment going, what do they have in common? And the only thing they have in common is they're white. I ran into Charles Barkley this past weekend. Well, not personally. I didn't say hello to him. I mean, he ran into him in that he was there and I was in the same place. Charles Barkley, of course, is a famous forward from the 76ers and the Phoenix Suns, one of the greatest NBA players of all time, and a very outspoken guy. Charles Barkley played basketball at Auburn, a school I'm very close to. He was there at the game this weekend, taking pictures with people and everything. And Charles Barkley had some comments about what Kendrick Perkins just said, too, implying that race had something to do with the MVP award. Check this out.
If only 5 white guys have won MVP in the last 30 years, that makes zero sense, his argument. 0 sense. Because if that was the case, we'd have a lot more white MVPs if white guys or girls, ladies, excuse me, I don't want to leave them out. If they're only going to vote for white guys for MVP, wouldn't the numbers be instead of 6 out of the last 30, wouldn't the numbers be way, way worse?
I mean, forgive me for introducing common sense into this. Charles Barkley brings up a great point. So let me get this straight. 5 or 6 people out of 30 were white and won MVP. And your suggestion is that they only vote for white people for MVP, even though 25 out of the 30 were black. It's just, that's kind of weird. It's almost like you don't know what you're talking about. And you're just looking for an excuse to introduce race. Because why? Because it plays well on Twitter and it plays well with dumb morons who love wokeism.
So Kendrick Perkins says only 3 guys since 1990 have won the MVP, not placing among the top 10 in scoring. And that is supposed to prove what? What is so special about the top 10 in scoring, dummy? I understand scoring is very important. After all, you can't win a game if you do not score. However, I think, and this is coming from someone who used to love watching sports, but I found something better to waste my time on. I think the 1990 Bulls will tell you, along with people like Chuck Noll, yes, I know he's a football coach, they would say defense wins championships. So let us undercut this mental midget Kendrick Perkins, who would have been slicing the lunch meat if he did not have a basketball career to fall back on. I wonder why Kendrick picked 1990. What is special about that? Why the top 10? Because it's a round number, or perhaps that is as high as this dumb jock can count. If Kendrick is starting at 1990, Magic Johnson won the MVP that year, and he was not in the top 10 in scoring, and I knew that off the top of my head. Derp. Did Magic Johnson win the MVP that year because of a bias among the voters for an award that is basically subjective? If I say Wilt Chamberlain is the greatest basketball player of all time, that is a subjective opinion, not an objective truth. If I say Wilt Chamberlain is the greatest scorer of all time because they had the highest scoring average in any season, that might be a bit closer. But basketball aficionados will point out there was no three-point line that likely added to Wilt's scoring because a 25-foot shot was worth the same as a dunk. Someone may argue the other way, saying the lane was narrower for the early years of Wilt's career and he would not have scored as much with a wider lane, and a three-point line likely would have lowered Wilt's scoring as he would have been able to kick it out to shooters on the perimeter after he was double-teamed. Some would argue Wilt overall would have been better with a good three-point shooter on his team like, say, Jerry West, because that would have taken the pressure off of Wilt. Would Wilt want scoring titles and MVP awards or rings? Magic Johnson also won the MVP in 1989 and was not among the top 10 in scoring. I think Kendrick deliberately, although that might be giving him credit for having enough intelligence to commit guile, he may have done this on purpose to avoid having one of the NBA's all-time greatest point guards listed in his little rant. That would not sat well with his audience. Here are the MVP winners from 1970 to 2022 who were not in the top 10 in scoring. A guy by the name of Willis Reed in 1970. Basketball aficionados will know who he is. Dave Cowens in 1973, white guy. Bill Walton, 1978, another white guy who was not even close to the top 20 in scoring that year. Hold on. Magic Johnson, 89 and 90. Dirk Nowitzki, 2007. Steve Nash, 2005 and 2006. And Nikola Jokic. I'll just call him Jokic in 2021. Because he won it in 2022, but he was in the top 10 in scoring that year. Incidentally, Magic and Steve Nash have some things in common. They both played an up-tempo style of ball, and both were assist machines. Nash was the runaway leader in assists in his 2 MVP seasons, Reminds me a bit of Magic Johnson. In addition, Jokic was in the top 10 in both assists and rebounds both of the previous 2 seasons, along with averaging over 26 points in both seasons. He won the MVP. His all-around stats are right up there with Magic Johnson and a guy named Oscar Robertson. I am no basketball aficionado, but it seems Kendrick Perkins is a bit dense. Dirk placed 11th in scoring in 2007, was the only guy in the top 15 who shot better than 50% from the field. I understand this. If a player averages 8 points a game and shoots 70% from the field, he is less valuable from a scoring standpoint than a guy who shoots 48% from the field and averages 25 points a game, just so you know. Now let me look at the average points per game of every person who placed 10th in scoring from 1970 to 2022 and see what we find. You could, for example, have a person who averages a high average like Dirk did and not finish in the top 10, not because Dirk is mediocre, but because so many other players are lighting it up. Here is one more thing to consider. Michael Jordan's 3 highest scoring average seasons, the Bulls did not win the title. Jordan was a better player when he scored a bit less and did other things to assist his team. Magic Johnson could have scored a lot more, but that is not his modus operandi. He was at his best pushing the ball up the middle of the floor, finding an open teammate streaking to the basket or spotting up for an open jumper. When the late, great Wilt Chamberlain won his 2 titles, he was scoring a lot less in the 2 years he won the title because it was better for him to get teammates involved in the scoring as well as doing what he always did well, guarding the basket and gobbling up rebounds. Kendrick Perkins might be a good basketball player, but he doesn't seem very bright. He's lucky he had a lot of God-given talent, otherwise he would probably be changing the sheets at the Ramada Inn. Now, if I take the average points per game for every player finishing 10th in scoring from 1970 to 2022, the cumulative average for all those years was 23.115 points per game, and the standard deviation was 1.41 points. The year Dirk won the MVP and was not in the top 10 in scoring, he averaged 24.6 points per game, more than 1 standard deviation above the average, so he's good. Jokic averaged 26.4 points per game in 2021, well above the average and 1 standard deviation above it. Kendrick's whining about them rings hollow, but I doubt he's smart enough to figure this out. Willis Reed averaged 21.7 points per game within 1 standard deviation, so he's good. Dave Cowens averaged 20.5 points per game, not within 1 standard deviation. Bill Walton only averaged 18.9 points, not even close to 1 standard deviation, so he's way out of the norm there. Magic Johnson in his 2 years was within 1 standard deviation, so he's good. Steve Nash was not in either of his years when he won at 15.5 points one year and 18.8 the next year. Let's keep going. The average from 1980 to 2022, that's starting with a 3-point goal, was put into play. The average then was 23.118, just slightly above the 1970 to 2022 average, and the standard deviation was 1.47, so hardly moved at all. So the 3-point line didn't really make a whole lot of difference, at least not as far as who was 10th in scoring, which is where Kendrick put his baseline at, so I just went with that. Kendrick's whining about Dirk and Jokic winning the MVP do not hold up, especially the latter, under statistical scrutiny. How about Bill Russell? He won 11 titles and appeared in the NBA Finals 12 times. He won 5 MVP awards and is arguably the best team basketball player of all time. He is most decorated for sure. In Bill's 5 MVP seasons, he never even finished in the top 16 in scoring in any of those. Is there, or was there, a big conspiracy to shaft someone else in favor of a black man playing center for the Boston Celtics? He probably, he didn't. I wonder, he may not even know that. Kendrick might try to argue the game has changed since then. It certainly has. The lane has been widened twice, most recently prior to the 64-65 season. And the NBA instituted, as I said, the 3-point goal in the 79-80 season. One more thing before we move on. How about Wilt Chamberlain's season where he averaged 50 points a game, over 12 points a game higher than second place? He also led the league in rebounding, and if they'd have kept block shot stats, probably would have led that too. He didn't win the MVP award that year. Isn't that a crock? One more stat to look at. Let's take a gander at en masse field goal percentage by season for the whole league. and see how the guys who never finished in the top 10 in scoring and won the MVP fared versus the league average and the top 10 scores per game. This is from 1970 to 2022. The 1970 NBA league field goal percentage average was 46%. Willis Reed that year shot 50.7%, so that's well above the average. 2 players in the top 10 were below the league average in field goal percentage. 1973 NBA field goal percentage, 45.6%. Dave Cowens was 45.2. Ouch, that's below the average. 3 players in the top 10 in scoring were below the league field goal percentage average. In my opinion, Tiny Archibald should have won the MVP that year, but what do I know? 1978 NBA field goal percentage average, 46.9%. Bill Walton was 52.2%. 1 player among the top 10 average scorers was below the field goal percent average. Bill Walton was a pretty good all-around player. 1989 field goal percentage average, 47.7% for the whole league. Magic Johnson was at 50.9. 2 players in the top 10 were below the league field goal percentage average. 1990 all-around league field goal percentage average, 47.6%. Magic Johnson, 48%. No players in the top 10 were below the NBA field goal percentage average. In my opinion, Barkley or Jordan should have won that MVP, but what do I know? 2005 NBA field goal percentage average, 44.7%, and the white guy Steve Nash that year shot 50.2%. 5 players in the top 10 were below the league average field goal percentage. Would Kendrick Perkins argue with a straight face that Kobe, Iverson, or LeBron deserve the MVP over Nash? Nash was much more efficient in his shooting. He was a lot better from beyond the arc, much better at the line, averaged fewer turnovers per game despite having the ball, bringing it up every time. And those 3, fewer turnovers per game than those 3, and was a league leader in assists by a long ways. Would Perkins want a guy that shoots 42% of the from the field to get 30 points? Or a guy who can score 18 or so a game, shoot better than 50% and get a bunch of his teammates involved? For an NBA player, Perkins is quite dumb. 2006 NBA field goal percentage average, across the whole league, 45.4%. Steve Nash, 51.2%. 4 players, and 1 was tied, in the top 10 were below the league field goal percentage average. This season, in my opinion, was not as strong as Nash's previous, but he still led the league in assists by a long shot. Shot better from 3, shot better from the field overall, and from the line, free throw line, he was better than LeBron, Kobe, and Iverson as well. Iverson scored a lot of points, but he also laid a lot of bricks. He was a better all-around player than those guys that year. Note, Allen Iverson won the 2001 MVP, but it probably should have been given to Shaq. Shaq shot a much better percentage from the field as he gets higher percentage shots. That's very important. He was less than 1 assist behind Iverson's average, which is a big deal for a guard versus a center. Got almost 10 more rebounds, and he was a much bigger factor on team defense. Were they racist when they failed to give Shaq the MVP, or was Iverson just the popular flavor of the month? Moving on to 2007. 2007 NBA field goal percentage average, 45.8%. Dirk Nowitzki, 50.2%. Well above the average. He's shooting high percentage. 5 players in the top 10 were below the league field goal percentage average, and Dirk had the highest field goal percentage in the top 11. How about that, Kendrick Perkins? 2021 NBA field goal percent average, 46.6%. Jokic, 56.6%. Among the top 12, Nikola was 3rd in field goal percentage. 2 players in the top 10 were below the league field goal percentage average. Jokic was 6th in the league in assists, 9th in rebounds, and 22nd in steals. A pretty good darn all-around player. That's why he won it. White had nothing to do with it. In 1987, Bird averaged 4.2 more points per game than Magic Johnson. Their field goal percentage was better than 50%, just about the same, but Bird was much better from the line and beyond the arc. Bird had 2.9 more rebounds per game than Magic, but 5.6 fewer assists. Bird had 0.6 fewer turnovers per game. Did the white guy Larry Bird lose his 4th straight MVP to Magic Johnson because racism? You argue about it. That concludes this detailed slapdown of the vacuous Kendrick Perkins, who would have been stuck in a crappy apartment drinking bottom shelf vodka if he did not have a basketball career to fall back on, kind of like LeBron or Scottie Pippen. Have a nice day, and don't thank me now for the information.